The serpent figure, the Balaam figure, the Satan figure, they are a hired false prophet placed into position within chosen garden to overthrow that garden's philosophy by bringing it back to the philosophy that they are endorsing and that they are hired to endorse. They are present within that chosen garden for the purpose of overthrowing its concept, for the purpose of casting doubt onto the mind, uppercase M, within that garden. They don't want anything else except their philosophy, which is the image of God, to prosper within, around, anything that has to do with those members within that chosen garden. When we think back onto that scene, it is the establishment of gods. It is the establishment of gods, and it is an established philosophy or concept that the mind within that garden brought that Adam out of. They were regenerated from the dust. We saw that illustration, what that means. They were taken from the concept of Genesis chapter 1 and given a new concept of regeneration. They should not have gone back to where they were supposed to be up out of, in sense of mind, in sense of mentality, in sense of character, spirit. But 2 verses sum up the events that take place within that garden. 2 verses sum up the events that take place within that garden. Proverbs 26 and verse 11. Proverbs 26 and verse 11. Proverbs 26 and verse 11 reads, "As a dog returneth to his vomit, so a fool returneth to his folly." They should not have gone backwards. They were taken out of the concept of Genesis chapter 1 for the purpose of moving forward into the concept of life. Knowledge of good and evil is what ruled Genesis chapter 1, that philosophy. They were taken to understand the philosophy of life, the experience of life, the mindset of life. Taking from that tree and consuming it, they went back. They fell back in nature, they fell back in character to where they came up out of. Which is why it says, "From dust thou art, unto dust thou shalt return." That's not a condemnation of you are born human, so you are going to die as you were, because none of us are created from dust, literally. So none of us are going to die, but I can get it. We turn back to that. That's not what the Bible here is talking about. That Adam in question, that kind of man in question, they are regenerated from dust. That is a figurative illustration. That is a figurative term. And it is a condemnation based upon their actions, that from whence you came, from whence you will return. That's a statement. That's a statement based upon their actions. That's part of that curse. Their inheritance, I should say, because they should have moved forward. "Unto dust thou art, unto dust thou shalt not return" was the intended experience, the intended statement, but they fell back. And then Ecclesiastes 1 in verse 9. Ecclesiastes 1 in verse 9, "The thing that hath been, it is that which shall be, that which is done is that which shall be done, and there is no new thing under the sun." This example proves that whatever the call is within that kind of man, it is inescapable. It is difficult for that kind of man, which is priest kind, to get away from the concept of good and evil, to get away from the idea of being gods, to transition over to an experience in and with life. It's difficult, and that's what the illustration there is really setting up, and we will see that the more we go on in this episode. But the illustration there is just pointing to the fact of how difficult it is for that resurrection, that regeneration of thought and of feeling, devotionally, to really stick and land. That illustration is showing how difficult it is for that kind of man to move forward and approach. Now, because of their actions, the tree of life was hedged up. The way to the tree of life was hedged up because of their actions. Looking at Proverbs 15, the culture of that tree was supposed to keep them guarded. The culture of that tree of life was supposed to keep them grounded in the experience and in the philosophy that they were supposed to advance in. Proverbs 15:24. Proverbs 15:24 reads, "The way of life is above to the wise, that he may depart from the hell beneath." That tree of life was an experience that was inward, that was for the mind, that was supposed to keep the mind and keep the inward person above the world. And when I say world, again, this is not literal natural world. This is the religious world. The way of the tree of life, when taken in, was supposed to take what is within upwards to escape what is below. Now, what is below? What is below? 1 John 2:15 and 16. 1 John 2:15 and 16. Love not the world, neither the things that are in the world. If any man love the world, the love of the Father is not in him. All that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life, is not of the Father, but of the world. Now, above the religious world, above the world, is an experience that is without the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life. Above the religious world is an experience that says, "Create in me a clean heart and renew a right spirit within me." Beneath, within the religious world, is the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life. And all of this sounds oddly familiar to Genesis 3 and verse 6. Everything that is said in that 1 John verse, that's 1 John 2:15 and 16, it is definitely similar to what is said in Genesis 3 verse 6, where it says, "And the woman saw that the tree was good for food, pleasant to the eyes, and a tree to be desired to make one wise." The same thing that the author writing that first book of John is saying, that's what is being said in Genesis chapter 3 and verse 6. The culture is supposed to be different. They were supposed to escape that culture. They were supposed to escape that culture of wanting to be gods. Instead of wanting to be gods, and instead of wanting to know good and evil for the purpose of making sure that godship, that God state is maintained, cleanliness of what is within was supposed to be the experience. Life, the philosophy of that tree, wisdom within the inward parts, truth in the hidden part, creation of a new mind and of a new spirit from within. They didn't want that. They didn't want that because that's not where they originally came from. They originally came from Genesis chapter 1, which is a landscape of being gods, which is a landscape not of the knowledge of life, but of the knowledge of good and evil. They should have been more prepared for the stimulus that tree that was accursed gave, but they were not. And because they were not that mindful, they took steps towards what they were brought out of, and which is supposed to be a lesson for us concerning justification. All of these illustrations pointing to what the conversation is to be justified from. That's pretty much the value of them. And when you jump down to Genesis 3 and 7, we get to find out what that stimulus within the religious world is in a more concrete way. Genesis 3 and verse 7 reads, "The eyes of them both were opened. They knew that they were naked, and they sewed fig leaves together and made themselves aprons." Now, when the stimulus of the religious world hits, we will want to create aprons for ourselves. And apron, as it is here in context, not the apron you may be thinking about with a chef who's cooking. Although for such an apron, if we do want to put that illustration in there, what's left out is the back. Front is covered, back is open. You're not that all protected or covered. But in context, this word apron, it's not what we may think as in a chef cooking or a cook cooking. This word apron, it actually means or can be translated to, in right context, girdle.
We are to have, as is said and believed when it comes to life and religion, faith. But when it comes to exercising faith, a very crucial aspect of having and exercising faith isn't mentioned. In order to have faith in anything, we need to know what we would have faith in. This book looks into how the Bible defines the process of justification. We are supposed to know what we believe. Personal knowledge will bring life to our experience with the Bible. Get justification to know how to safely take care of your faith.
Does that word sound familiar? Girdle. The apron that they sewed unto themselves. The apron that they sewed unto themselves was a girdle. The opening of their eyes helped them to realize that they were naked, and we will see what that means. But in realizing what that nakedness is, it compelled them to create aprons unto themselves, or I should say, girdles unto themselves. This should be a familiar term to us. Exodus 28 and verse 4. Exodus 28 and verse 4 reads, "And these are the garments which they shall make, a breastplate, an ephod, and a robe, a broidered coat, a mitre, and a girdle. They shall make holy garments for Aaron thy brother and his sons, that he may minister unto me in the priest's office." When we think girdle, of which apron can rightly be translated to, we are immediately brought into the context of priesthood. Girdle is the thing that the priest wore around the waist to cover the loins. These are the aprons that they created. Now, the figurative illustration here, the author of the book of Genesis in this scene is pointing out. Revelation 1 and chapter 1 and verse 12 and 13. Revelation chapter 1 verses 12 and 13. "And I turned to see the voice that spake with me, and being turned I saw 7 golden candlesticks. In the midst of the 7 candlesticks, one like unto the Son of Man, clothed how? How was he dressed? In the midst of the 7 candlesticks, one like unto the Son of Man, clothed with a garment down to the foot, and girt about the paps with a golden girdle." This idea of girdle, whether it is going from the paps to the loins, it is a girdle, it is a garment worn by priests. The Son of Man here in the book of the Revelation, as seen in vision, is appearing as a priest. The opening of their eyes, which was the transcendence of being now gods, or having the state of gods, or wanting to be gods and knowing good and evil, it led them to see their nakedness, and seeing their nakedness, to cover their nakedness by aprons or by girdles. The author of the book of Genesis is telling a story. They are telling ecclesiastical history through colorful language. They're using colorful language to get across a very concrete and solid point about what will happen when the kind of man that the author of the book of Genesis is talking about in chapter 1, in chapter 2, and in chapter 3 begins to feed on the philosophy of that false prophet, that recurring generational false prophet. When they feed on it, the desire is a desire to priesthood, to the continuance of what the image of God is. And knowing good and evil being a concept Not anything that has to do with literal morality for good, literal morality for evil. Good and evil is put together as one for a concept. A concept where predicted outcome is established from preconceived or prior placed action. When you put these two things together, what you get is the establishment of priesthood, and there can be no other outcome. There can be no other outcome than creating a girdle or an apron for such act as is in that third chapter, than priesthood. The opening of the eyes, the stimulus of the religious world that the serpent gave, that Balaam figure gave, it moved them to create unto themselves a girdle. And that girdle, most famously associated with priesthood, author of the book of Genesis is letting us know that from the moment that that kind of man consumes the philosophy of that serpent, they will be encouraged to move into the terrain of priesthood for the purpose of continuing concept of expected outcome from predicted or preconceived action. Or it will be well to cover up nakedness by religious law. But what does it mean to be naked? Now, when we think nakedness, we should not really be thinking terms in literal nudity. Because the concept of nakedness, not just here in the book of Genesis, but throughout the scriptures, the context isn't literal nudity. When we think nakedness, we can think in terms of 1 Corinthians 4, 10 and 11. 1 Corinthians 4, 10 and 11. 1 Corinthians 4, verses 10 and 11 reads, "We are fools for Christ's sake, but you are wise in Christ. We are weak, but you are strong. You are honorable, but we are despised. Even unto this present hour we both hunger and thirst and are naked and are buffeted and have no certain dwelling place." When we're thinking of nakedness, this is the context of where nakedness where our mind should go. When naked, one is without a certain dwelling place. When naked, one is hungry. When naked, one is thirsty. In essence, nakedness has everything to do not with the physical body's nudity, but with the nudity of the mind, with the nudity of the character, and since we are in the Bible, with the religious character, with the devotional character. When one is naked, one's devotional character is ignorant or is empty. When one is naked, one's religious experience is thirsty and is hungry. When naked, not literal, this is mental. And this is inward, and especially pertaining to the devotional conversations, thoughts, feelings, actions, and behaviors, they are misguided. They are completely empty and void of meaning. They are in lack, they are in a state of lacking, they are in need. The conversation is in need. Lamentations 4, verse 21. Lamentations 4 and verse 21. "Rejoice and be glad, O daughter of Edom, that dwellest in the land of Uz. The cup also shall pass through unto thee, thou shalt be drunken, and shall make thyself naked." Now, when you think of what it means to be intoxicated, you can understand of what it means to be naked. The intoxicated individual, they are belligerent. The intoxicated individual, they may not know what they are doing. The intoxicated individual is ignorant. When in a state of nakedness, that's that. And it's not literal. It has everything to do with the religious belief, with the devotional conversation. When the devotional conversation, when the religious belief is naked, the devotional conversation, the religious belief is belligerent. It is ignorant, and it does not know what it is doing. It is naked. Looking at Romans 8:35. Romans 8:35. Who shall separate us from the love of Christ? Shall tribulation or distress or persecution or famine or nakedness or peril or sword? All of these terms here mentioned are synonymous with being naked. When naked, one is in tribulation and they don't know it. When naked, one is distressed and it's not known. When naked, one is persecuted or under persecution and it's not known. When naked, one is in a state of famine. When naked, one is in a state of suffering the sword. When naked, one is in a state of peril. This is what it means to be naked. When naked, when known that there is now nakedness, one becomes understanding of the fact that their devotional conversation, that their religious understanding, that their spiritual experience, it is famine, it is famished, it is in a state of enduring famine, it is in peril, it is distressed, it is persecuted. And the one thing that can be thought to do when found in such a situation, the one thing that is impulsive to do is to create unto self fig leaves, turning out to be an apron. Or the one thing that can be done to do is to think to hide our belligerent condition, to hide our ignorant condition, to hide our shame, our ignorance by an apron or by an act, by pretending, by a route, by a routine, by thin fig leaves, by pages, because that's what leaves are, to cover up our lacking of understanding and the realization that we really need to cover ourselves, but there's nothing around to cover myself with. I'm just going to sew something together and cover myself, not self-literal, self-devotional religious. When brought to that state of the opening of the eyes, they saw that their devotional conversation, they saw that their understanding was in peril. And understanding so, they began to create to themselves girdles or aprons.
Embark on a voyage through the veils of prophecy with heaven's genuine and counterfeit ministry. Peer into the shadows of time as this book unveils the earth beast's journey. From its enigmatic origins to its astonishing expansion. See how the earth beast skillfully weaves a web of false religious ideology. Its aim set on seizing universal religious and political dominion. But that's not the end of the story. Heaven's genuine and counterfeit ministry exposes prophecy's veiled truths, empowering you to discern authenticity from artifice. In addition to learning about the character of the earth beast, find out how this book is your companion, being a shield against spiritual manipulation. Unearth the enigma, challenge the illusion, and discover the earth beast and its quest for dominance. The decision rests with you. Are you prepared to unravel the truth?
Looking at Habakkuk. Habakkuk chapter 2 and verse 14. Habakkuk chapter 2 and verse 14, last verse on nakedness. Habakkuk 2:14, woe unto him that giveth his neighbor drink, that puttest thy bottle to him, and makest him drunk, also that thou mayest look on their nakedness. Again, nakedness to the Bible's mind, because we really ought to keep it there, is not literal nudity, it is devotional or religious nudity. The opening of their eyes saw that they were naked because they now had the concept of godship and knowledge of good and evil within them. Having an understanding of what the gods do, and again, as in the previous episode, these are not extraterrestrial, whatever you want to think from whatever place. That's not what the Bible's getting at. In right context, gods are ones with whom the word of God came. These are priests, these are ministers, these are prophets. This is priesthood. In right context, the gods here are priests of priesthoods. Knowledge of good and evil is a concept. It is a concept of creating expected outcome from previously understood action or previously thought deed. When you put gods and knowledge of good and evil together, what you have is priesthood conducting experience for an expected outcome, and that can only take place by religious law. Now, taking and consuming from that tree's philosophy opened up their eyes to what it means to be a God and to what it means to be knowledgeable of good and evil. Having this understanding now, they began to see, as they did not really get, that they were naked. Yes, they were naked and were not ashamed. They were ignorant devotionally and were not ashamed. They were belligerent spiritually and were not ashamed. The mind that brought them there saw them in this condition and did not care that they had no idea of what their experience was. That mind did not care, they did not care, because their experience was supposed to be one of learning. When the learning experience gets stripped of its innocence and is now turned to an experience where the learning experience is being covered up by priesthood. And when I say by priesthood, I'm saying by art of priesthood. Everything that you can think of what that would be, that's what I mean. Art of priesthood, creating religious law for expected outcome. That's the image of God. When the intended experience gets covered up by the image of God, the number one thing to do is to create unto self aprons or girdles, or to create unto one's self religious laws and standards therein. The learning experience goes away. The learning experience goes away. That's why in the chapters after Genesis chapter 3, you don't hear that much about the all capital Lord God. All you now see is the Lord. A new entity has taken place, has taken shape after they have been placed out of that garden. Because the Lord God, the all capital Lord God, the Lord God, and that intended experience has been covered up. That experience has been covered up. And that's what the stimulus given by that recurring generational serpent, recurring generational Balaam, recurring generational Satan, that's the stimulus. And that's the intended stimulus that they want to give to that chosen garden. To keep that chosen garden's mind not moving forward into the experience, into the intended experience that is mindful, but into the experience of the first chapter of the book of Genesis. The experience of the combination of being gods with knowledge of good and evil, which is an experience of continuing priesthood through the placement of religious law and control of conscience therein, both to the members that are therein and to the followers without. And to do so subtly, and each generation that life has ever existed in, this character appears and gives to the then generation a new subtle deviation from the last, yet appearing to continue with it perfectly not known, and with the image of God as its basis, to get the then chosen understanding out of sight, out of mind, and hidden to the then minds of that generation. The intended philosophy of the living creator, of the living God, is hidden, it's covered up by the philosophy of the serpent. All of a sudden, the serpent's philosophy has made it appear that it is that deity to be honored. And with that, the shape of everything changes. The culture of the trend that the serpent wants to place into continues, and the cycle goes on. And as I ended in our previous episode, until we wake up. But we can only wake up until we just honor that way of life is above to the wise. Because when the mind is above and beyond what the religious world is, the journey begins, the journey can be full, the journey can get the type of learning experience that it needs, and the individual human being can become what it is supposed to become through the growth and the development of their devotional conversation through that experience.